My name is Jason Foster, and I was diagnosed with left ventricular noncompaction, also known as LVNC. LVNC is a genetic disorder that I was born with. It is when the left ventricle does not develop right. When I was diagnosed with LVNC, it was pretty late on in the disease process, I guess. I was already in heart failure. So within 10 months from getting diagnosed, I needed a heart transplant. So it did happen pretty rapidly, and I did have to quickly stop working and get into the hospital so that they could start caring for me there. So with the diagnosis of LVNC, I was required to have a heart transplant. They do a lot of physical and psychological testing to make sure you're fit to be on the heart transplant list. In March of 2018, I was put on the heart transplant list, and then in December of 2018, I was admitted into Johns Hopkins Hospital to wait for a heart and the heart transplant. When I was admitted into Johns Hopkins for the heart transplant, they immediately start you on different medications to help your heart pump better, to help you feel better. And then at that point, it's just a waiting game. So obviously, to get a heart transplant, the only way to get someone else's heart is if they pass away. And it has to be a pretty perfect match to you to have the transplant. So realistically, you're just waiting in a bed, waiting on someone else to die so you can receive their heart. So I actually didn't have to wait very long in Hopkins for a heart. I was very lucky. And within 18 days of my stay there, they were able to find a very good match for me. And on January 13th of 2019, I received a heart transplant. So on January 13th, I received my heart transplant. I had to spend another 13 days in the hospital after that recovering, and then I was able to come home. And then once I came home, I had nurses that would come to the house every day and help care for me. My wife Jessie cared for me every day. And then from then on out, it was a lot of medication and a very long recovery. I remember some of it. A lot of it's very, very foggy between the medication and the trauma and the whole surgery and everything. It's normal to not remember much of it. After the heart transplant, it definitely felt different. I could feel my heart beating. It felt harder, it felt faster. I felt a lot of what to me felt like pressure. When you get a heart transplant, your resting heart rate is much, much higher. So my resting heart rate after transplant was around 120 beats per minute, which is double what it is for a normal person. So that was something that took a while to get used to. That eventually goes down. I think now it's down to about 90 beats per minute, which is getting closer to normal. So recovery is different for everyone. For me, physically, I recovered very quickly. I was up and walking around within 24 hours after the transplant. 13 days later, when I did come home, I was walking around the house. It was very difficult because you have a lot of muscle atrophy from laying around for a month or so, but physically I recovered quickly. Mentally was a lot harder for me because of all the medication. I wasn't necessarily prepared for the psychological recovery I was going to have to go through, and that, I would say, psychologically it probably took me 2 years to recover, mainly because of the medication that you're on. So the medication you take after transplant, there's quite a few of them. There's probably 3 that you have to take for the rest of your life. The other dozen or so that you're on, they eventually wean you off of over time. And I think it took me about 1.5 years, almost 2 years, to be weaned off of the other dozen medications. Once they wean you off of those, you do start feeling better, you start feeling normal again. But I will have to take 2 or 3 medications for the rest of my life. And that is to suppress my immune system so that my body does not try to reject the transplanted heart. Your body sees the new heart as a foreign body, a foreign object. So just like when you get sick or anything else, the antibodies will start working to try to reject or get rid of this heart. So that's what the medication does. It suppresses that so my body doesn't start destroying the heart. Obviously, that would be a very bad thing, and you would need another transplant. And I'm hoping that I will only have to do this one transplant, and this will get me on for the rest of my life. So when it comes to a heart transplant and whose heart I receive, I don't have any say in that at all. It's really up to the surgeon and my doctors, my team of doctors at Johns Hopkins. Like I said before, there's a long list of things that have to be checked and matched in order for me to receive a healthy heart. I don't know anything about the donor of the heart. They won't tell you anything about it. The only thing I know about it is it came within a 500-mile radius of Johns Hopkins Hospital. There is a third party that I can contact, and it will help facilitate getting in touch with the donor's family if they're interested in that. And that works the opposite way too. They can get in touch with this third party and they can get in touch with me. I have not done that yet. That's something that I feel like you have to be prepared for. It takes a lot of thought, and I want to make sure when I do that it is the right circumstances and that I know exactly how I want it to go down. So after transplant, you have a transplant team that follows you for the rest of your life. At first, they are in contact with you constantly. Right after transplant, when you come home, you have to go back to the doctors on a monthly basis and get checkups, and they just check on you. And the further you go out from transplant, the further those visits are spaced out. Now that I'm 4 years post-transplant, I only have to go in once a year for a checkup. They check my heart, they check everything about you, and just make sure you're okay. As far as hobbies and anything I can pretty much do whatever I want to do, as long as it's safe, obviously. The doctors do a really good job of informing you of everything, so there wasn't much I was missing. The one surprise, I guess you could call it, I had was the side effects of the medication that can really psychologically kind of play with your head. I'm sure at some point they warned me of that, but either I didn't hear it or I missed it or I don't remember it, because that was my biggest struggle, was just the medication and that psychological battle you have. I would definitely recommend anybody that went through a transplant or any sort of traumatic surgery like that to talk with a professional and look for help. The only advice I could give anybody that needs a heart transplant is that there's never going to be a right time. You're never going to feel necessarily ready for it. I didn't. No matter what you do, it's a scary process, and it doesn't get any less scary the longer you wait.